50 years ago today, the NEPCO oil tanker ran aground, spilling hundreds of thousands of gallons of crude oil right into the St. Lawrence River. The Slick of 76, as it's become known, has become a thing of folklore and a warning of environmental devastation in the Thousand Islands and beyond. It even spawned a musical. A new documentary captures that disaster in the words of the people who lived it. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Morja Wealth Management, serving the North Country for 3 generations. MorjaWM.com. Advisory services offered through Hightower Advisors LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. And Kinney Drugs, now accepting S3 Nations benefits and OTC Network Wellness benefit cards for eligible over-the-counter health items. Details at KinneyDrugs.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Tuesday, June 23rd. First up, it is primary election day, and a big one in the North Country because both Republicans and Democrats are choosing their candidate to run for the open congressional seat that Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is leaving behind. Our reporters were out talking to voters in both parties today. On the Republican side, the district GOP has endorsed Assemblyman Robert Smullen, but President Trump is backing Sticker Mule CEO Anthony Constantino.
Trump's my man, so I'm going with Constantino.
Doug Bidwell from Russell in St. Lawrence County turned out to vote for Constantino and for Republican candidate for governor Bruce Blakeman.
We need to get rid of Hochul, for one thing. She's making laws really terrible against the way we do life here. Gun laws, everything laws. So we need somebody new in there. I think we need to make this state red.
On the Democratic side, St. Lawrence County dairy farmer Blake Gendabine is facing Lake Placid restaurant owner Stuart Amaral. First-time voter Abigail Walco of Saranac Lake just turned 18 yesterday and is a registered Democrat. The top 2 issues she's focused on during this election are climate change and women's reproductive rights.
The whole abortion conversation has been a big part of my life, just being a woman growing up and, moving into a world where, don't really know what's going to be impacting me, but I know that, abortion right is going to be something that's impacting me. So my main focus has been on that. Polls are open until 9 o'clock tonight. After that, we'll have news on the results on our website, ncpr.org, and tomorrow on Northern Light and Story of the Day. The Trump administration is suing New York State over its recently passed immigration law. Jimmy Vielkind reports for the New York Public News Network.
The new state law prohibits formal cooperation agreements with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It also restricts all law enforcement officers, including ICE agents, from wearing masks while on duty. The Justice Department says Albany lawmakers overstepped their authority in trying to regulate the federal government, so they sued the state. John Sarcone is the U.S. attorney based in Albany. He says the state should stay in its lane.
It's a separation, right? There's the state and there's a federal system. Federal law enforcement has a right and duty to do their job.
Governor Hochul is defending the new law. She sued to let the mask restrictions go into effect this week and says they are important to upholding public trust in law enforcement. In Albany, I'm Jimmy Vielkind for the New York Public News Network.
North Country native Emma French wanted to preserve the oral history surrounding the oil spill that devastated the Thousand Islands, a place she loves. So she made a short documentary featuring the residents, the muckers, and the responders to the disaster. French says it was a foggy, humid night 50 years ago when the NEPCO oil tanker hit a shoal off Wellesley Island.
It was a large bang. Somebody that actually talked to the captain of that ship, the captain said that, we heard a large thunder, and then we kept going. So they kept going upriver after they had initially broken the hull. They went upriver, and they went into Browns Bay, where they were supposed to stay, but they hit ground again, didn't think anything of it, and then they kept going upriver. So at 1:30 a.m. in the morning on June 23rd, there was 300,000 gallons of oil leaking from this barge into the St. Lawrence River, and they continued upriver.
One of the things that I learned from your video was that they didn't even realize that they were leaking this oil and that they were just going all up the river leaking oil the whole way.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that you heard a bang in your ship and you didn't think anything of it. I don't know what the captain was thinking. I don't know what the crew was thinking. But pretty quickly after the first couple of hits, people could smell it.
I was closing up. Just when we opened the door to walk out, you could just, the air was just smell of fuel oil. About the same time the sirens started.
And so then people woke up the next morning to hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil, of crude oil, washing up on the shores of the beautiful Thousand Islands, the beautiful St. Lawrence River.
Yeah, and the thing that people consistently tell me about is the smell, that people woke up and they could smell it. And the oil wasn't, all the way downriver all at once. It took days for it to go from Wellesley Island to Alex Bay to eventually Chippewa. And if you think about the nature of those bays, it sucks everything in.
So they recruited and paid people to clean the shoreline.
Taking applicants, and basically if you could walk and talk and you looked reasonable, you were hired on the spot.
It didn't take any experience to muck. Bend over, pick it up.
Like just hand, rock by rock, duck by duck. I'm sure you talked to some of those people.
Yeah, and it was not easy work. Some of them were wearing, it was limited equipment, but you had wetsuits or big, heavy suits, and it was hot and it was summertime, and you were going rock by rock, and they had absorbent pads, and they had things that looked like pom-poms that they were just using to soak up as much oil as possible. Alix White told me that they were chopping down the wetlands, the reeds, because you can't get oil out from the reeds. And one of the most devastating things was the people saw the wildlife, the effect of the wildlife. So the fish were dying, the birds were dying. And this is June. That's one of the most important times for the river because things are reproducing.
Tell us about an interview, something that surprised you, a conversation that you had with somebody.
Yeah, Alix White was one of my favorite interviews. She was the second woman hired to be a mucker, which was a big deal. Don Price, who ran Sealand Restoration, wasn't hiring women at first. And she was a mucker. She was doing those sorts of things. And I'm going to bring it back to the wildlife because we talk about the birds and the fish, but blue herons are a particularly iconic species of the St. Lawrence River. And she described how one day somebody brought in a blue heron covered in oil.
And I was just holding it and watching the weight of the oil pull the feathers off the spine. And Sammy Vafiatis took it away from me and killed it because that bird was not going to survive. For me, that was my moment of understanding how serious that was.
When she was telling me that and describing that to me, you could tell that it was something that was deeply moving to her. I hesitate to use the word traumatic, but there's got to be some desensitization when you're doing that day in and day out. And so to be in that field of desensitization and then to have a moment where you're like, wait, this is a lot more serious than you were thinking about. I think she did a wonderful job of explaining it to me.
What was it like for you to talk with all these people who had firsthand knowledge, you who had only heard of this from your grandparents, from your parents, as, sort of a younger generation person?
As a person who likes to document everything, really, I just wanted to get as much information as possible any way that I could. So I went to school for film, and that was the best way that I knew how to document everything. And so while I had people in my interviews, I just wanted them to talk and talk and talk. Obviously, I feel a very, very personal connection to this area and to the river. And so really, at some points, it just felt like two people who love the river talking about the river. And it doesn't feel like younger generation, older generation. It just feels like, all right, we got this shared love. You had an experience. What was that experience?
Emma French is a filmmaker from the North Country. She was working with Save the River in Clayton when she made the short documentary Remembering the 1976 NEPCO oil spill. The massive oil spill happened 50 years ago today. You can watch the documentary right there on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Christopher Watts and Danny Thomas, both of Canton. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.